Today's game that we're going to be looking at is Among the Sleep. I, Egacaster, played at least an hour of this, and Rumar, my friend here, he actually, I think he played a little bit over an hour, and I believe he actually ended up beating the whole game. Isn't that right?
Beat it.
Yeah, so I think what we're looking at is it looks like this is going to be kind of a short game, but it isn't. It's an indie fuck game, so you know we got to expect that sort of stuff. Though one thing I'll say, for an indie game, this had really good atmosphere. The sound design was particularly good. I remember, I think for long stretches of time, I literally didn't see an enemy anywhere around me, but I was still scared because I could hear like things going in the background. And like they sounded like familiar, but I wasn't quite sure what they were. Well, like was it just the wind? Did I knock something over? Like I didn't know what was going on, but I could hear everything around me. And the design was great too, because it starts out in a normal house, but as the game progresses, spoiler alert. You then end up in sort of a more topsy-turvy fantasy, dark fantasy type world. And I like that it didn't stay just inside of a normal house, which, I mean, that can be scary for a toddler, which you play as, but I'm glad that it branched out from there, because it's a video game. Like, why stay inside a house if you can go anywhere? And they definitely did that pretty shortly, like, I don't know, like half an hour, 20 minutes into the game, you're already in sort of a more fantastical world, which I really liked, and that put you also in an uncomfortable sort of unknown area, which added to the fear as well.
Good point of the game that I enjoyed probably the most is little subtle things they put in the game, such as crawling is better than walking and running. You'll get running, but then you'll trip and fall over, or perhaps not just the atmosphere, but like say I would have to say the transition between the worlds was another good touch. It's kind of like entering Silent Hill. Whereas, as opposed to other places where you're already starting off in a mysterious place, you don't know where you are, and you just go explore, and then things go to hell.
Well, you mentioned the running, and then a difference between running and crawling, which I actually liked, because you could crawl, and I didn't interact with the enemies enough to know if that was more silent, but I assume it was. It was a fast crawl move that you could do, and be a little bit more quieter because you're crawling and it's quieter than running, I guess. But what I really liked too was that if you got up and ran, since you're a toddler, you actually had a chance to fall over, which if you were being chased by something would, that would freak me right the fuck out. And it added to that sense of sort of uncertainty, like, if you need, the light to get around in some areas because they're so dark, you have to be standing. So if you're standing and you want to run and get away from something quickly, you always have you're never sure if you're gonna like end up falling over and then maybe, hey, there's another game over. Whereas you could crawl and it's about as fast as the run, but you're not gonna have the light in some areas. That's just not gonna be possible, or it's gonna, you're gonna possibly run into a corner where you're gonna be trapped. It really added again, like this move towards keeping everything very, very scary, very atmospheric. And I like especially the lean that they had, which lean made perfect sense in this game because you're essentially being, either trying to hide from or being chased by something. So the best thing you want to do is to be able to see it before it sees you, and the lean facilitated that. And it's a function that I've sort of seen drop off in a lot of, especially first-person games, where it's sort of like, well, we couldn't balance for lean because the people are using a controller and they didn't have enough buttons for that, I guess. You think with the next gen we'd have, more buttons for leaning, but that's a separate issue. This game had it, and I liked that a lot about it. And and movement felt smooth. Like I wasn't like clipping on like geometry in the world. So when I needed to, I could move quickly, but again, with the other elements of, falling over and having to choose between standing and walking, that always, it gave me more of a choice of about how to approach things, and then if I chose wrong, and there was consequences for it.
It's a good gamble.
Yeah.
Here's another point is I did like it about how it's completely different in its own way, where, of course, you're a toddler, as opposed to an unarmed person, only armed with a cell phone or a flashlight. Instead, you got a teddy bear, and you've got a wild imagination. That is a really good touch on it. It's fresh in its own way, but it's still kind of expected. I could predict what could and would not happen, but there was enough to it to keep me guessing. Like the creature that you eventually come across, the big threat is much later in the game. It doesn't show up in the very beginning like every other indie game you see these days, which is definitely good. I didn't like how it was designed though. It reminded me of like a thing from Dr. Seuss, like Thing 1 and Thing 2 from Cat in the Hat, just with like a dark twist. It kind of made me think of that. I don't know why. I guess just the way it's shaped, but it was really tall. And it still creeped me out, especially I've had some seriously close run-ins with it. And seeing that thing charge at you, it really gets to you, especially when you're so small in comparison. That in and of its own, able to trap, like kind of bring you into the game, really, really helps it along the way. And when it comes down to being able to pick it up and play it again. So I'd say it has good replayability. I would say take some time in between so it's still fresh. It doesn't get stale and repetitive over time.
So, in the end, what is our impression? Well, for me, Among the Sleep, it's a great thing that came out of the indie scene. I enjoyed the time that I had with it. It felt much different than a lot of those Slender clones that have been coming out recently, especially because I remember Tony Lawson from OneUpIsland.com, he played this game Daylight, which was another indie fuck game, and it's literally just set in a forest and with trees and then like some old sheds and stuff. This took you to completely different places, like a complete magical sort of dream nightmare world, and that to me was much more interesting and felt more worth of my time and definitely of my money as well. The graphics were good. The people kind of looked a little wonky, but you spend barely any time with your mom and anyone else who looks like a human. The monsters, which you said, looked like a sort of a demonic sort of a Dr. Seuss character, which I could kind of see that. But it was good enough, especially because it used that sort of amnesia thing of like, oh, you don't want to look at it, so if you see it, it freaks you out, so you want to look away, so you don't look at it too much. And that was pretty good. And again, the atmosphere was great, and the graphics facilitated that. The sound design was probably the best thing about this game, and the movement felt pretty good. Overall, I was impressed by Among the Sleep. I'm not $20 impressed. I'd say maybe $15. But maybe I'm thinking around $10 is what I would happily pay for this game, especially since I think Rumar, because we only have to play these games for an hour, but I think you ended up finishing the game, which I'm not surprised because I think I got 2 or 3 of. You have to collect 4 things to like finish the game. I collected 2 or 3 of those within the hour that I played. And so it was you having beat the game that sort of comes down to like an hour and a half to 2 hours worth of game, which for $20 is a lot, but $10 for this good of a package, I'd say, is pretty much worth it.
I would have to say about 10, 12, $15 seems like the perfect amount.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean you actually beat the game.
Right. Well, there's still games more expensive that are just as short, too, out there when you think about it. Like you said about Amnesia and Slenderman clones, the whole Dr. Seuss and Nightmare in Wonderland basically is what it comes off as, which is good. It's like you can still see and understand what is the imagination taking from. You can see elements from the playground, from a library, from the basement, the kitchen, the bedroom, etc. And they kind of tie it in, and then it just opens up into a whole nother dimension, which is amazing. I like that a lot because being an adult, you still should be able to fend for yourself, no matter how freaky the monster is, even if you must run. But the light source that people come up with, and you pretty much can't do anything but run. Don't look at the thing or you're dead. You got a flashlight or a cell phone. That's all you're armed with, which seems pretty casual. I mean, you're driving, whatever. But again, I mean, it's always some creature, some monster, or some psychopath chasing after you. You can't even do anything. You got a phone. You can't call. You just like shine a light to see where you're going, and
Yeah, it seems unrealistic unless they say somehow, like, oh, all the cell phone towers around the place were mysteriously knocked out, so there's nothing we can do.
There's no service. And what about how about always start off, you don't know what's going on. Another point this game takes is they keep it simple. You know your objective, you want to meet the objective, and it's for a great reason, to get back to your mom. You're a little kid, you're lost, you're with your teddy bear, you're scared, you want to get to your mother. Simple as that. You know your objective. Find the memories.
Yeah, it definitely it sort of focuses you a lot quicker than a lot of other horror games where they sort of just like they drop you here and it's like, oh, collect the notes or survive. This
Collect
it's
the
like
notes.
yeah,
Turn
like,
the dial. This puzzle. Find. Turn on. Turn off. Go upstairs. Go in the basement. And it's so lucrative. It gets to the point where the door is locked. The door is locked.
over and
The
over
door
again.
is locked. Every time you go, it's always a door is locked. There's no way around. There's no way to get in. You know that's where you need to go. So your objective is now to find the key. It's in every horror / survival sort of video game.
Yeah, and this
It's
one
not in this one.
yeah, like I mean, the most that you have is like these memories or whatever that you have to collect, but it's one for each level. It's like that little goal that you have to get to, and you keep coming back to the door that you have to place those in, but you get to go to a completely different area for each item, so it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm stuck in this one place and I got to walk around here until I find these notes, and that's all you get. No, this you get like 4 different worlds and then back to reality, and I think that was that expanded it a lot more than, again, a lot of these other Slender Man Amnesia clones.
And the ending, I will say, is kind of predictable. It's kind of predictable. I'm not going to spoil that, of course, because still a lot of it's still fresh, so a lot of people haven't played it yet. So all I got to say is kind of predictable. Still expect a pretty nice twist, though. That's all I've got to say.
Okay, well, yeah, that seems like this, with the time I spent with it, the journey getting to the end is well worth. So even if, it's a little predictable, that'll be fine because we'll have fun getting along the way. Or we'll have a terrible time being scared everywhere, but you know what I mean. Well, thank you so much, Rumar, for helping me with this hour impression, and thank you all out there for watching. I'm Megacaster, and remember, check out oneupisland.com for more videos, articles, and stuff.